Cool. All right. Yep. Everybody, please come in. We just had hopefully good lunch. We have a very, small topic, as in how do we unify Ethereum? No big deal. And yeah, maybe before we actually get into it, I would love to actually introduce every member here on the panel. As we said, we have like half the team members kind of like switched out. But as we maybe introduce everybody and like introduce yourselves and like what you're working on, I would love to get actually some personal anecdotes from you guys about why does unifying Ethereum matter, right? And kind of talk a little bit about maybe like what is something that like you did like let's say a couple of years ago, right? That like now feels like harder, right? Like, and that's the reason then why we can talk about unifying Ethereum. So maybe with that, like Hart, if you want to start us off.
Well, Nam, why don't you introduce yourself too?
Yeah. Sure. My name's Nam. I work on a project called Hyperlane. It's cross-chain interoperability. Part of what we're trying to do there as well is obviously to unify Ethereum, as well as other ecosystems. But kind of the thing that I noticed, honestly, like 2 weeks ago, I think, was I had some like USDC on Polygon, and I think that was still from like the bridged USDC days. And MetaMask no longer shows like bridged USDC in the token list by default. So I was just like, oh shit, like where did my tokens go, right? And so I think this kind of concept of like you have like USDC, a token, right? You didn't have that like concept like a couple of years ago where you had to like think about like, oh, I have some USDC here, I have some USDC there. And so very much I think this is an example of kind of this like need to, right, like how do we get back to this like user experience of like just having tokens in your wallet and you can do stuff with those. And so that's kind of like part of what would motivate my questions around like how do we get back to that kind of experience.
You know, it's funny, I had the exact same experience, like bridged USDC on Polygon not showing up in MetaMask, like literally, yeah, it was last week. So I relate to that. My name is Hart. I'm one of the co-founders of Across. We are intent-based interop, best known as like a fast bridge. So we are going for the 2-second bridge experience between L2s. I actually want to shill both me and Karl, where we're giving talks on unifying Ethereum at DevCon on Wednesday. If I get the calendar right, I got to shill this, right? It's important. So I'm doing a panel with Vitalik and Ben from Optimism and a bunch of other people at 1:30 in DevCon, and then 2:30 I'm doing a talk on unifying Ethereum. And Karl, you're doing a talk I think at 5:30 on defragmenting Ethereum, right?
Very different.
So this is like a topic that's near and dear, but I look at it as I think one way we can assist in the Ethereum versus Solana wars is you can say, hey, Ethereum actually has incredible scale now. You want more scale? You want more block space? Add another L2 or L3. But it is not particularly usable when you have all of these L2s or L3s. And if we want the ultimate like end game here, I click one button and Ethereum feels like one unified network, like it did back in the day when there was only one chain.
I'm Leland. I'm unfortunately not Uma. Uma is a co-founder of Succinct. I'm Leland. I'm just an ecosystem person at Succinct. A good way to think about Succinct is we build a ZK VM called SP1, which makes it really easy for any developer to write ZK. So instead of using Circom, Plonky2, Plonky3, all you do is write Rust, click a button, and now we have ZK. So I think for me, like what I care a lot about for unifying Ethereum is like how do we accelerate developer timelines. I think often, like in the past, like developer velocity was like much higher because the community is much smaller. And how can we be like really laser focused and build like products like faster than before?
Hell yeah. I am Karl, working on Optimism. And so, yes, I actually also, by the way, had a similar experience, not a couple weeks ago, but like a couple months ago, trying to get USDC onto Polygon. And then I got USDC onto Polygon, but I forgot to get Poly onto Polygon. Anyway, it was a whole mess, or Matic or whatever. Anyway, it was crazy. But I think that one thing that maybe doesn't get, I mean, maybe this does get talked about, but one thing that I'll just add on the unifying Ethereum beyond just like a front end and like user experience perspective, but also from a community perspective, it is critically important. I mean, the whole point of Ethereum is to create unified protocols that the entire world relies on. That is like the magic of Ethereum, period. That's what gets me very excited, the world computer. And I actually think that there's a huge amount of like narrative weirdness around this, like, I guess not being true, because I will just say that, you know, I'm jamming with every single Hyperlane, UMA, and Succinct. You know, we're working together to build out Ethereum. And like, I think there's you know, an untold, you know, uncool, unhot story there, but you know, it's real, and so, you know, don't stay up too late at night. You know, we're here trying to make Ethereum real.
Yeah, I think speaking of something that you just mentioned, Hart, is something that I think is very easily forgotten, right? Like in the like 2018, 2019 days of when like app developer would build on top of Hyperlane, on top of Ethereum, and they would just complain about like, oh man, my users just like, right, like expending enormous amounts of like costs to expend on gas. And that was like a rallying cry for the Ethereum ecosystem, right? It was like, hey, how do we scale this experience? And obviously over time, like Ethereum kind of like, not just from 2019, but from before that, right, like talked about like scaling and like the roadmap centric aspect of scaling. Obviously you, Karl, like you were like very instrumental kind of in that experience. But now I think not only have we, right, like maybe like sharded, I think, technically speaking, right, from terms of like the block space is sharded everywhere, but also I think the community. And so I'm kind of like, before we kind of like dig into like the specific, I guess, technical things that you guys are working on to kind of help unify Ethereum, I'm kind of also curious to like set, I guess, the stage a little bit for the like cultural aspect of like how do we unify Ethereum? Because I think one thing that we have maybe discussed recently is kind of like, yeah, Solana, right? Like, oh, monolithic, everything is like kind of like one very cohesive community, one single block space. And so like how should like the Ethereum community, of which we are all a part of, like how should we think about unifying not just the technical aspect, but also like the cultural aspect? And like, sure, maybe all of four of us here sitting on a stage is one way of unifying, but I'm kind of curious, yeah, like how, like what do you guys think should happen more from like a cultural or community perspective to unify Ethereum?
Bring back the benevolent dictator.
It's honestly a good one, right? But I will say that the competition is healthy competition is a wonderful thing, and I think that there's just times where it gets PvP or maybe a little ugly that is less good. But you know, the benevolent dictator does talk about how there's just this diversity within the Ethereum community, and I think the roll-up centric roadmap is a very cool example of 4 years ago, like October 2020, Vitalik's like roll-up centric roadmap, and all these teams innovate to execute on it in a sort of aligned but also different vision, and it worked, right? I actually think that's kind of cool. It did take 4 years, which seems too long, right? Like I'd say we only hit that with blobs of March this year is only when L2s actually became cheap. So it was like 3.5 years to do this. I would like us to unify Ethereum in less than 4 years, maybe like 2025 be nice if we could get that done. But culturally, I don't think the competition is bad, provided it's healthy. And I also think having a credible competitor like Solana is a unifying force in its own right.
I think we need to move to Texas, make friends with Elon Musk, and change the Twitter algorithm. I mean, the X algorithm. No, I'm just kidding. I do think, like, the point, though, there is just that I do think that actually a lot of the, like, divisiveness comes from, you know, like, honestly, algorithmic sources. And, like, when I talk to people, they're normally pretty reasonable. And we got to remember our humanity and, like, remember to work together. And, you know, we'll make it. And honestly, we should be used to, you know, keeping our heads down and building through the chaos. By now, it's been many years of it, at least for those who remember. And for those who don't remember, it's okay. We'll get through it.
Okay, cool. Remember, everybody's a human. Remember that all of the same game, playing part of the same long-term games, and I think that's a good reminder. Maybe switching back over more to the technical product side, right? Like we talked about this kind of like bridged UCC problem on Polygon, which is very interesting. We all had the same problem, but yeah, I would love to dig into right, like how each of y'all kind of like working towards basically reducing the occurrences of those kind of problems. And maybe Karl, I'll start with you. Obviously, like Superchain, super the news. Unichain, right? Like Ink, like a lot of people are kind of recognizing, I think, that benefit. And so I'm kind of curious for you to like expand a little bit on like, obviously you guys been thinking about this for a while, you've been working on it, kind of like, yeah, what led you down to it? And like, why do you think you see the reception now that maybe others haven't seen yet?
I mean, I honestly, what I would shout out is, you know, Hart with UMA in terms of just like intents being the literal solution to that problem. Like that is the universal kind of like liquidity transport, you know, stuff. I do think that at the same time, obviously the superchain, incredibly pumped for the various like interop initiatives that we're doing, including the intent-based interop, including, you know, low latency message passing. I think that there's like a huge amount of opportunities that, you know, developers will be able to have building like cross-chain applications. And so I think a really important part of the superchain is the fact that it is like, you know, open source, open standards, and, you know, we're working on making sure that the entire, you know, Ethereum community gets upgraded to the, you know, the best possible interoperability. And honestly, like, to answer the literal question of getting liquidity onto Polygon, it is 100% the standard that you need to look at is intense. I don't know that if you say nothing, I'm very embarrassed.
He gave you a layup card. You gotta like take it.
All right. Thank you, Karl. I'll try to match your enthusiasm. So, okay. The general view I have here is if we are going to unify Ethereum, there are a few boxes we have to check. Like there's a UX box in both like dApp and wallet UX that I think there's more to talk about there. Probably need some graphics and workflows to work through. But okay, there's that. I think account abstraction is part of it, which is part of how we get to chain abstraction. Talk about that too, a whole other talk. And then there's speed, right? We need this to be fast. So I'm pushing on this 2-second speed limit, which I'm making that up off of Google UX research, where if a website takes more than 2 seconds to load, users just bounce. So if we're going to onboard 1 billion users, it's got to be 2 seconds, it's got to be fast. Fine. Now, when you have rollups that don't have 2-second finality at all, like how do you do that, right? Well, you need to like bypass that finality risk. And so this intent architecture, one really nerdy way to think about it is you are having third-party solvers take on that finality risk on behalf of users for a very small fee. And if you do that, you can say, okay, very abstractly, this intent architecture is this layer of abstraction where users are going to pay these third-party folks to just move funds to wherever they need to go very quickly, take on the finality risk, and then the user's happy and they go on their day, and the protocol then figures out somehow, some way, how to pay that solver back by verifying the fill. And this is where you guys are my friends, okay? So if the two chains you're going between are super chains, then we can verify the intent was filled using superchain native interop. Great. If the two of them, we'll pick it's not a competitor, but Polygon egg layer. If they're both egg layer chains, we could use egg layer interop to verify that, pay them back faster. We can use Hyperlane too, by the way. No.
Oh yeah.
Succinct, like ZK, okay, ZK everything. We love ZK. Everybody loves ZK. We could use ZK proofs to prove quickly that the intent was filled. And so my big push around this standard for intents that we're pushing is it's not about across at all. It's completely open, and it's completely modular, where we can plug in whatever the latest and greatest interop technique is between those two chains to make that intent be very, very cheap. End of rant.
Yep. I was just gonna. I think since I've worked with both you guys both very deeply, I think one thing that I want to kind of emphasize, I think, to the audience is that both of these are like great at basically what we just call the cultural unification of Ethereum, right? Like, because obviously you can build these things yourself, right? Like you both have like incredible market power where you could probably drive pretty much whatever you want. But I think what's super interesting as a kind of like third-party observer is that, for example, for Superchain, your specs are like fully open source. You see all of the GitHub discussions around like, hey, if you are a stakeholder and you want to kind of like make sure that you consider X or Y, like you can just go on GitHub, submit a PR, leave those comments, right? And then the same with like 7683, right? What you're working on, Hart. Like you decided to build a very broad coalition of kind of all like interested stakeholders in the Ethereum ecosystem, because you recognize that this is way more powerful if we kind of have this kind of like cultural unification of it. And yes, obviously like building a super chain, building intents that kind of like can cross Ethereum ecosystem takes time. Hopefully not 4 years. Hopefully next year. But I think that to me is like a great example of like how we can kind of help unify Ethereum, not just from a technical perspective, but also from a culture perspective.
Yeah, strongly resonate. I'm so sorry, but strongly resonate. Like, okay, we often hear like open source is a public good. Like, what does that actually mean? Why do we say that? It is because what we are doing is we are building software standards that no one owns or the public owns, right? Like this is a universal thing by its very nature. And so to unify Ethereum, we just need to build the open source protocols that provide abstractions, that provide the tools, that provide the things that developers need to build on top of all of these, all of these different standards, all of these different chains. And so like this is, I think, intents are a perfect example of this. I honestly think, and Hyperlane as well, even like, I think that we really are getting to a few core kind of fundamental building blocks of these protocols, whether it be like message passing, liquidity, and all these intents and solvers and that's not something that any one person or entity owns. And like if they do, then we need an open source alternative. And so I don't know. I think like by its nature, as long as we're like building in this cooperative way, then we're just like the network effect of that cooperation is like immense.
And actually, like both of us are like building together. The fact that you're building in the open is like really amazing for us, because like for us, we've built this like ZKVM, which is very performant, but the question is like, what do we do with it? And they're like, oh wait, you have something called Kona, you have the OP stack. Like, what happens if we prove like your state transition function inside Succinct? And all of a sudden now we have like this like ZK rollup, and like this wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for collaborating with you. And that's really exciting, because now we're accelerating rollups even more.
Yeah, speaking of, because I don't actually know how that happened with you guys, because I think one thing that I always find very fascinating is like, why is our industry interesting, right? Like our industry is interesting because nobody needs permission to either develop applications or use applications on top of us, right? And so I think what I found super cool about the OP stack, right, is that like nobody needs permission to like switch out the proving layer to add something like Succinct, right? And so was that something where like, right, like Leland, you were like, oh man, we should talk to the OP guys, but they're very busy. But you know what? We don't need their permission. We can just do it.
Yeah, so the story behind that, it's like, Optimism cares a lot about having like multi-provers, like multiple types of like fraud proofs. And so they developed this library called Kona. And we were like, oh wait, this is in Rust. That means we can just put it inside our ZKVM really easily. And we're like, why don't we just try doing that? And we're like, okay, like we did that. There's some performance issues. Like, let's go talk to Clabby and the Kona team. Like, hey, can we like add this like one change that makes it much more performant? Like, please. And like, yeah, no worries. Like, we'll do it for you. And then like, there's other changes that you guys are doing, which we're really grateful for. Such as like the prover fee. So like, that's something like, please merge that.
Yeah.
It hasn't been merged yet.
That's
but please,
the plan.
that's really important.
That's the plan. Don't worry, we got you.
Cool. So it's been a bit kumbaya up here. Everybody is like, oh, like I love you, like.
What's the next question? No.
Yeah, right? Oh, God.
Well, I guess one thing I'm curious about is, right, like we're here at this conference, we talk about all of these like important problems of like unifying Ethereum, right? Like we're working on better settlement through like OP Succinct, right? We're working on like, oh yeah, like let's make solvers solve everything through like intents, right? Let's have like native interop across all of these chains with the superchain. And so these are all super important efforts, right? Like hopefully next year, all of those are solved. I'm kind of curious, like, where do you think that will get us, and what's missing to then actually unify Ethereum? Like, are we done next year, or like, what do you think are the parts of unifying Ethereum that kind of like are either not currently being paid enough attention to, or not being worked on, that kind of like fall outside the efforts of our people here on stage?
Yeah, I think it's UX stuff. Like we basically kind of have the Lego blocks. Like I have clarity around the Lego blocks and what they can look like. I've got clarity around like really the L2 roadmap and like where it's going to go and like ZKifying it and all that kind of stuff. I think there's a lot of little hiccups around UX stuff that is even unintuitive. Like let me give you a random example. So because dApps can see how much money is in your wallet, like on your chain. A common UX pattern is if I go to buy something, if I go to buy an NFT and I don't have enough money, it says, okay, I can't buy it. Like the buy button's grayed out, right? go to Web 2 and like that would never happen. It's like they don't know how much money. They're like, you don't have enough money. They don't do that, right? They don't know how much money you have. You would go to the shopping cart and hit buy and then pay for it from wherever you want to pay for it. But okay, in Web 3, we can see how much money is in the user's wallet, so we gray it out. Well, now if their money's off 50 chains, they might totally have enough money, just like not on that chain. So like, what do we do there, right? That's a design like pattern we fell into from a single chain paradigm that is now not relevant in the multi-chain paradigm. And I don't actually know like how you're supposed to fix that. Are you supposed to aggregate everybody's balance? Like a bunch of stuff there. So I think there's lots of hiccups on the UX side. I think whether the chain abstraction UX lives at the app layer or at the wallet layer, I think is an open question. That's my kind of laundry list of stuff that I think we gotta figure out.
Yeah, that's actually a great question. I'm gonna just use, maybe somebody in the audience knows the answer, but we've previously thought about this as well, right? If you have like proxy wallets on like a remote chain that can actually like just in time basically give the user the balance to then actually buy this NFT. I think one of the issues, as far as I know, is that a lot of dApp UIs are kind of like built with this kind of note, like they don't even use the wallet's RPC, right? Like they're just like hard coding particular index database that they have, and so you need to like switch all of these dApps to basically like somehow become chain abstraction aware to do so. And I'm actually not like, I'm sure if there's chain abstraction folks in the audience, they can tell me that, oh, there's already an EIP for this, but like it definitely seems that like that's not solved, I guess, right?
No, I think there's like a fairly messy migration process here because you're right, like RPCs get hard coded, right? Like I've heard people talk about like intercepting RPC requests to like inject new data to chain abstractify them type thing.
Yeah.
And like that seems really messy. So I think what will happen, honestly, is there'll be like some design patterns that emerge. There'll be a best practices for how you do this, but like wallets and dApps are gonna have to do a bunch of hard work to make this actually work. So.
All right. Oh, go.
Or I was going to say, or the answer is like, if you want to unify Ethereum, we could just say like, hey, we should just have one canonical wallet and like don't use anything else, which is sort of like against the ethos of like decentralization.
Yeah, I guess Karl, I'm curious about your answer because I assume this has to be like answered for like superchain dApps, right? Like how will superchain dApps like, I don't know, Uniswap or like others will kind of like know that like, oh yeah, the user actually has USDC on another superchain chain and they can use that to actually purchase this NFT.
Okay, so first off, I'll caveat my answer with there's going to be a lot of people experimenting in a lot of ways, and I could be horribly wrong. But I will give you my personal kind of hot take. I will say I am incredibly bullish passkeys. I'm not gonna lie. I am so bullish like embedded wallets and like applications having, wallets. And then once we have a wallet per application, then like funding it or connecting it to our like main wallet. Okay, so just a little like context. I became incredibly pilled about the universal login feature of Ethereum back in the day, and I was like, oh my god, this is incredible, and everyone in the Web 2 world is going to adopt it. And then I learned about how many scam Uniswap websites there are and how everyone just ends up giving all their money to some random scammer because they looked at the character wrong in the URL. Horrible, absolutely horrendous. So I don't know, that made me very bullish on like kind of encapsulating the damage that you can do as you go to different applications. And then like you have like a bank account, which is like your big wallet that you have all your money in, and then you have like application wallets that has like $5 in it, and like you don't care if it got hacked, it's fine. Like I don't know, I'm personally very bullish on this like more permissioned and like multiple wallet, but then that obviously begs the question, what about composability? And so I'm very bullish connecting all the wallets together. So anyway, that is a little TLDR rabbit hole about like wallet UX, but I could not agree more that the key thing that we need to do is make crypto usable, because let's be honest, it's not usable right now. Like I don't even like using crypto. Like that's a real issue with the people building it are like, wow, this is gnarly, And so we just need to get to a point where I'm like, oh wow, I like did a thing and I was like, I got value out of it, and I'm an end user, not just like a random protocol developer like scouring YouTube videos for like weird nerdy insights. Like no, that time has come, and that time I'm hoping will have passed with a wave of mass adoption.
Don't we all want that mass adoption? Leland, I'm curious from like your Succinct side, right? Like you kind of like very deep in infrastructure, and we just talked about like, oh, the main problem with unifying Ethereum is like UX. So I'm kind of curious, not to put you on the spot too much, but like, like how do you feel like your work, let's say either with OP Succinct or others, is kind of like helping us create better UX, even if maybe indirect?
Yeah, so I think a lot of times if you fundamentally change the underlying infrastructure, it creates a lot of unlocks that you couldn't have done previously. So for example, people have been really excited about passkeys for a really long time. People have been excited about multi-sigs for a very long period of time. However, using them was always very expensive. You're like, oh, you're using this on Ethereum. Like a lot of other people are using Ethereum. I don't want to spend $10 to like do this thing. Like probably not. And now we have like L2. It's like, oh, it's very cheap. So now everyone has a multi-sig. Everyone uses, or everyone will hopefully be using passkeys. And so this is no longer a problem. So one specific infrastructure problem that we're spending a lot of time thinking about is like finality. And so like OP Stack has done really, really well, but one downside is potentially if you want to move your assets off OP Stack to Ethereum, it takes 7 days unless you use like a faster bridge, such as like Across. And so because you have things like Across, like most users do not realize or recognize like UX barrier. But if you can get it down to an hour, which we've done with OP Succinct, it actually creates a lot of new unlocks that you wouldn't realize. So for example, like when it comes to like fees would go down dramatically because now you don't have like you're rebalancing assets across multiple chains. Like you have to wait 7 days. It's really hard to do the risk management.
Yeah, let me help you out, Karl. We need this.
Yes,
we need Across needs this.
Part of the super chain, please.
Yeah,
chain.
Yeah,
Keep
my
going,
understanding.
Leland, keep going. I just wanted to say, like, no, like you're right. The 7 day bridge is the biggest problem, like a behind the scenes problem for users and interop and solvability. So maybe our friends at Optimism could help us solve that. Keep going, man.
Yeah, so like if you have this like 7 day withdrawal window, it just makes it really hard for these like interop, I guess, intent layers to kind of balance assets behind the scenes, and because of that, like they charge much higher fees. But if it was much faster, then the fees could be way lower. Then like more users would want to use these chains. More users would want to bridge across each other. Like every time you spin up a new rollup, you're always praying like, I hope users will come. And if your finality takes a long time, users may be very hesitant to move assets on top of it. But if it's really fast, people are like, I can move money, experiment, and leave. So more usability overall from a fee perspective.
On the 7 day withdrawal, I just want y'all to know that we're going to talk with L2B, Bartek, right after this. And I promise we're going to try to lower the withdrawal times as much as possible. However, it is a non-trivial engineering feat to retain the decentralization properties that we are looking for, especially as we are aiming to stage 2.
Hey, Bartek, I'm going to talk to you later, too.
Bartek is a popular man. Again, I think a lot of kumbaya on here. I'm just gonna leave it at that, I guess, and maybe switch it to one more question, which is, all of you guys have competitors. Like, what is maybe one thing that you would say that your competitors do well that help unify Ethereum?
Wait,
Like,
now, are there two of your competitors? Are there both of your competitors,
no,
bridges?
I was gonna make the same pitch to Hart like you did to him. It's like, oh, like we have better settlement so that you can like allow your solvers to like rebalance quicker, right?
So you are competitor.
So no, I'm a modular system. Like you can use a like Succinct or any other system to like do settlement. Anyways, switching it back, and I'm happy to make us competitors afterwards if you want to, I guess. But yeah, curious about what do you think? Right, like each of you have like competitors, and they also are obviously like claiming to work on unifying Ethereum. Kind of like if you want to just share one thing that you feel like, hey, actually, they're doing well. They're like, this is something that like I respect that they're doing to help kind of like us with the exact same problem, right? Because all of you guys work on interesting stuff, but that doesn't mean that your competitors are not. Or you can say that too. You can just say like, you know what, like Brian from Stargate, man, like not doing well. If you want to.
Can I go last?
Sure.
Okay, I mean, I have a slight cop-out. I mean, it's not a cop-out. It's just a word of encouragement. I love all the competitors that are building open source software. Everyone build open source software.
That is a cop-out, Karl.
It's not, what?
That is a total cop-out.
Look, we're not everyone in the world builds open source software and like, maximizes their, compatibility with other folks. Like, I think it's a great thing, and we should congratulate every competitor and ourselves. No, congratulate every competitor who is building open source software. I think, I don't know, that is the thing that I request, period. Because that's the key to unification, in my mind.
I mean, I love having competitors because a fire underneath your seat like always drives you to, accelerate Ethereum faster. But in another sense, like for us, like there are other like zk VMs out there, like, and we're really excited that they exist because like multi-proving will become very common. And well, I suspect multi-proving may be very common in the future, and it's important to have like multiple like zk VMs out there to enable that. So for example, like Tyco uses like RISC-0 and SP1 and TEs for the multi-proving. So it makes the chain stronger, and we should embrace it.
All right, Hart. I agree. Those were cop-out answers. Save us.
Well, okay. So I got one competitor that people know of me. They're not exactly competitor though, so they do something slightly different. They're the ones that I think they're very good at marketing, but I don't necessarily think that helps Unify Ethereum. To answer your question,
So it doesn't answer my question.
that doesn't answer. There's another competitor we have that that's a little bit less known, that I think is doing a good job at getting to new chains very quickly. Maybe making a different set of trade-off assumptions that we are. It's true. It's true. There's different trade-offs.
Multi-sig?
Huh?
Like multi-sig security, or
It just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But they are getting to other chains faster, which I think is great, with a different set of security assumptions, which is a fine trade-off.
Are they open source?
No.
Okay.
All right. Doesn't get to call stamp of approval. Cool. I think we have to wrap it up. So maybe I'll give each of you guys one closing statement about like the UX of Ethereum, like at the next, like I guess Dev Connect next year. Like, what do you think? Well, like, what will we talk about next year? Will it be exactly the same, or will it be like, oh, you know what, we solved this?
Okay, Dev Connect doesn't seem, or Dev Connect, not DevCon. Okay, when's that going to be? How much time we got?
I'm assuming the same time next year, but I don't actually know. 9 months.
In 9 months, we're still fucked.
Yeah, I'm concerned.
But I think in 2026, realistically, in 2026, I want one button click and I can do an action. I can do an arbitrary action on any chain, and the user doesn't. It's just literally like, we want to talk about making crypto usable for users. It's like I click a button and then the thing happens. That's where I think we can get in 2026.
I mean, okay, yeah. I think by that time, I don't think we're gonna get revolutionarily new user experience. I mean, there'll be some like on the fringes, some cool applications here and there. But I do think that what will be notably different is that there will be a kind of, I don't know, this is my obviously biased take, there will be a massive kind of greenfield opportunity for developers who are like building cross-chain applications, building intents, building like things that are leveraging the tools that we're talking about to like, we're building a bunch of protocol layer stuff, and then there's one layer on top, which is like the dev tools. And then once the dev tools are good enough, then you can start seeing the like crazy creativity at the app layer. My hope is that we at least level up to the next level, which by the way, we have been stuck on the dang protocol layer for what, like 8 years or so. So like, this is a major moment that we're like moving towards a, real new frontier of unifying Ethereum, this interoperability story.
I think for me, I'm hoping maybe in 9 months that we have a bunch more like ZK rollups, and the goal, and like more multi-provers, so that like the chains are like or have more safety, they have more liveness. Like, I think something really interesting is like Ethereum has never gone down because there's multiple clients. We can't say that about all chains, unfortunately, but the hope is like in the future, like like more rollups will go to like a multi-prover model, which means that they'll never go down.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Tom.